I had always been told, and I've looked for 40 years for this car.
We are in the west central section of Michigan, where the Sleeping Bear sand dunes form a unique setting for Glen Lake, toward which the sands are creeping at the rate of 6 feet a year, burying trees and every unmoving object in their glacier-like path.
Louis started buying and renting horses over the dunes in the late 20s. In 34-5, he started experimenting with the balloon tires to run over the dunes. Eventually, the dune car replaced the horse rentals over the dunes. The Sleeping Bear Dunes became a destination attraction with the advent of the dune cars. Everybody come up, took a dune ride. It was the thing to do. This whole area, I say Western Michigan, it's certainly a lot of the influences from Chicago, and of course, eventually from Detroit got just as popular from the southeast coming up here.
The native Indians name this picturesque region Lilano, or Land of Delight, and the true meaning of its name has become significant to the thousands of visitors who come here for their summer holidays. But for a most unusual thrill, we suggest a ride over the sand dunes in these so-called Dunesmobiles, which are appropriately equipped with balloon tires and other accessories for desert travel.
My first memory of the dune rides, I rode in the generation before the 1948 Fords, and then in the 48s, my father always took me for rides.
I remember it being a thrill ride type thing, even though it wasn't billed as that.
It was a thrill because they were going fast, particularly before the roads, and they also, you'd catch air. You knew you were in the air with these things. And that was a thrill, just in its own right.
But it was a very pleasant ride. Everybody had the same canned speech, I think, all the drivers.
And at every stop you had to give a spiel, tell them what was there. You'd enter the dunes, you'd come around, and you could see the two islands. You went up the gravel hill to the top, and then that'd give you a nice view. You could look back and see the islands, or look ahead and see the mother bear.
The awesome view of Glen Lake that you get when they came around the other side, where you walk up, and that view in itself was just breathtaking. And then when they would stop along the cliff that goes down to Lake Michigan, they were right on the edge. They weren't somewhere back. When they stopped and you were sitting there, you looked down and you were looking down over the edge. And at that time, they also would go over to where it went down to Lake Michigan and park so you could get out and throw stones down and that kind of thing.
The customers, they always wanted to get out the car and run down to the lake, which is 400 or 500 feet down. And on each trip I would take a round rock and put it in the trunk of the car. And to demonstrate to these people, I would roll the rock off the side of the bank and tell them to keep your eye on the rock. That was always good for a $5 tip at the end of the ride.
As far as the drivers goes, that was every young guy, most everybody. It was a good job for a lot of people for a lot of years. School teachers in the summer, young people out of high school.
There was a lot of hype, if you will, about being able to drive one of these things. It was difficult to get the jobs because everybody wanted to do it.
That was the best job I ever had.
Well, I've got a list of over 115 drivers that we've learned, and most all of them are 18 to 24, you know.
I always dreamed about driving one of the Dunesmobiles and had a job for a very short period of time. And I got the job to drive this particular year, and I had driven a week, and the gentleman who owned the Dunes ride asked me if I had a chauffeur's license, and I did not. I wasn't old enough, so I could no longer drive it. It wasn't that I did anything wrong. And that was a real put down for me to not be able to do that. So I mowed lawns for the summer.
A 34 Ford, a 35 Ford, 4 37 Fords, a 39, and then a 41 Mercury. That was his first fleet, was a hodgepodge of several different cars. Then the next fleet was a complete fleet of 48 Fords. Later the fleets were 56 Oldsmobiles and then 65 Fords. But his first complete fleet with the decals on the side, claiming to be Sleeping Bear Dunesmobiles and all decked out, was the fleet of 48s.
He traded the Fords in on 56 Oldsmobile convertibles here in Traverse City. And I didn't have the wherewithal or I had the interest but not the money. And they quickly sold. And by the time I got really interested, which was several years later, they were just missing. They were gone. Something had happened. They'd ended up as junk. But this one always kind of surfaced, but nobody seemed to know where it was.
Number 9 has been around here. Different people had owned it. I'm not sure who bought it from Louis. I think it just happened to be number 9. It's the one that was photographed by Fred Dickinson. So it certainly is the poster board car of the fleet, I think you could say.
It was sold in a used car lot. And it was sold out of some place like in Benzie County or wherever. And it was just a 48 Ford convertible.
I knew that Frank J. Paulus had taken in some of them.
The trail seemed to get hot and cold.
This car number 9 was, I think, the Van Pelt family out of Northport. Then it was passed on down to the son.
Mike May ended up with it, loaned it to our museum for a couple of years. We had it on display in our lower level.
It really, I really thought it was gone. I tried so many different avenues, and I was just going up the wrong avenue because it just kind of disappeared. And I ran into a lady last year who's on the Historical Society for Leelanau County. And she asked me about if I would help her with some cars and boats and things that they didn't know about. So I did, and I said, and I have one thing to ask you. I said, I'm looking for one of the Ford Dunesmobiles. She says, I know where it is. And I almost fell over it, really.
It was purchased through Carl Andreessen to the J&R Museum out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But
He didn't own the car. He kind of worked for a guy who was going to own it and restore it.
We let it sit for a couple of years, and then so when it came time to do a restoration on it, we did a body off total restoration, and Joyner said, that this car has turned out to be a little bit more of a sentimental thing for you, Carl, so I'm going to back away from it, and I'm going to let you take over on restoration. And then the entire conversation started with the fact that the car really did not belong in New Mexico. Once Gab and Ivana Joyner realized how much this car meant to the area up here, they thoroughly realized that they did not want to drive it, that it should go back into northern Michigan.
I was just astounded, and I went and looked for 2 things. It has no radio, and it has no heater, and never did. And I knew it was original.
That's right.
Because they wouldn't be ordered that way if it was. This car never had a radio or a heater.
I mean, this is one of 10.
Right.
9 of them are gone. And this is the only one. It happens to be the one that you really remember. But that was just the case, right?
Yeah,
When he traded these in on the newer cars, the cars that looked more current, they all went away.
Right.
And that's just kind of what happened with a lot of things like this.
To see that car restored and then come back to Traverse City, I think that's a wonderful thing.
The car came back, and if there was a place to reveal it to the public, would be in 4th of July parade in Glen Arbor, Michigan. And so we kept it somewhat under wraps until that time came. And that was the first time that anybody had really seen it.
I think from what I saw on the 4th of July, the oohs and the ahs of seeing the car back up here. I had put 2 years of my life into the restoration of the vehicle. Gab Joyner had put quite a bit of his money into the restoration of the vehicle. It made everything worthwhile. Everything, the money and time, worthwhile.
In the parade, so many people shouted at me and just saying comments about what a wonderful thing to have back. And I drove the car to Glen Haven. I didn't do it. I'm in my late 70s, and to think that I was able to drive this again. Never give up. Never give up.